Hey everyone. In this video, we're going to help one of my subscribers get ready for a big tournament happening this weekend. The video was supposed to come out a while ago, but we only managed to record it now, so we'll focus on preparing him as best as possible in just a few days. The goal is to help him absorb everything quickly and show up at the tournament feeling confident and ready to go. I'm really excited for this one because he's playing Gladiator Beast Control, a deck I've tested a lot, played a lot, and feel very comfortable with. Honestly, it's the same deck I would bring myself if I were playing in a tournament right now. Alright, so this is the list he's currently playing, the one he sent me. It's obviously quite similar to mine since he's been watching my videos. If you want to learn more about this deck, I recommend checking out some of my previous videos where I go into more detail about it. Now, the only big difference here is the two extra monsters, Breaker and DD Assailant, which I personally don't play. From my own testing, my first impression is that there are just too many monsters in this list. Sure, sometimes you lose games because you don't draw a monster, that's true. But from my experience, and I noticed this also watching the replays he sent me, you actually lose more often because you draw too many monsters, and in a deck like Gladiator Beast, that's a real risk. This deck isn't super flexible, and if you see too many monsters, you can easily lose to something as simple as your opponent dropping a 1900 attack beater. I've had a lot of discussions in the past about the right monster count, and I'll say this, even though it's good to listen to outside opinions, it's crucial that the deck feels like your own. I don't say that lightly. When I was competing, my best tournament results always came when I played something that might have looked a bit different, but it was a deck that felt truly mine. There were times I went to events, got criticized, or even laughed at because of the list I was running. People always think the majority is right, but that's not always true, both in Yu-Gi-Oh! And in life in general. Playing something different doesn't automatically mean it's better, but if it's something you believe in, you'll always perform better than if you just follow the crowd. I've fallen into that trap myself. Sometimes I'd play my own build, feel great, and do well. Then the next event, I'd listen too much to what others said was correct, and my results would drop. So my advice here would be to cut at least one monster. Between Breaker and DD Assailant, pick the one you prefer and move the other to the side deck, even if it doesn't make perfect sense. If you really like the list as it is, keep DD Assailant in the side deck and just side it in when it feels right. It might sound strange, but what matters most is that your deck reflects your own decisions. The other difference is the number of chariots. You're playing 2 instead of 3 in the main deck. Personally, I'd run 3. I just hope the reason you went down to 2 isn't because it's what's currently trendy in Gladiator Beast builds, especially in the Tiger versions. In Control, even if you don't always get to use it, Chariot is your strongest trap card, so in my opinion, you should take advantage of that. This version is already super stable. You'll almost always have a Gladiator Beast on board, and sometimes that's exactly how you win games. I see just one bottomless trap hole here. Now, even though it can sometimes feel awkward in certain matchups, it's still one of the most versatile traps in the entire format. And in a control deck, that kind of flexibility is exactly what you want. You have to think about it like this. You're playing a stable deck. While other players show up with stuff like Tuners, Lightsworn, or Vayu decks, which are obviously powerful, they also rely a lot on getting the right mills or opening hands. You, on the other hand, are showing up with Gladiator Beasts, and you know exactly what your deck does. You're a consistent engine. Sure, you're not making flashy plays. You're not the guy who opens Prisma Test Tiger and blows up 5 cards on turn 1. But you'll notice that same player 5 minutes later in game 3 is sitting there with a dead Test Tiger and a useless Prisma on board. Meanwhile, you're playing a deck that does the same thing every single turn. Summon a gladiator beast, set chariot, set another trap, and repeat. That's the real strength of the deck. Consistency. Yes, there will be games where you don't see a monster, and there will be games where you see too many. But in a long tournament run, to actually top, those things will balance out. You might lose a game or two to variance, maybe even a full match to bad luck. But the key is to end the day with no more than 2 match losses. That's the goal. Obviously, nothing is guaranteed, but that's the mindset you should have. So, going back to the list, with that consistency in mind, I'd focus on consistent traps. And from that perspective, Bottomless is the kind of card that in 90% of games, you'll actually be able to use. Unlike something like Starlight Road, for example. So personally, I'd play 2 Bottomless. But again, if you feel more comfortable running just 1, that's totally fine. What matters most is that the decision comes from you. Now, looking at the side deck, it's pretty close to what I play myself. I really like the My Body as a Shield copies. When I was testing the deck more recently, I found them incredibly strong, especially when going second. They're key in matchups like Black Wings or the Mirror match, and trust me, in those situations, My Body can be absolutely devastating, especially when used on something like a more Mio activation. So I'll wrap it up here. Those are my thoughts and recommendations. Take my opinion, think it through, and then make your own choices. When you go into the tournament, be completely confident in what you're playing. No doubts. Even if you end up going 0-3, you should still be able to say at the end, you know what? I'd play the exact same deck again in the exact same way. All right. Now we're going to analyze and do some coaching on the replays he sent me. Unlike the previous videos, I tried speeding up the matches this time to cut out as much dead time as possible. Here, I would have also set Typhoon. Your opponent has 4 back rows, so you're pretty safe. Typhoon is a chainable card anyway. It can act as bait, and more importantly, it gives you the option to use it in end phase, on something your opponent can't chain to. It doesn't make a huge difference here. There's also the dust shoot factor, but it's just a small detail worth noting. I also like that you set Hoplomus here. That makes sense, especially in game 1, since it helps you keep your deck hidden. And of course, the strongest aspect of Hoplomus is when your opponent doesn't expect it. You could have gone for the aggressive play too, since you had Shrink and a Bottomless, but with 4 back rows, the chance of a Dimensional Prison was pretty high. So I like your decision here. Alright, so here I might actually surprise you. The situation is obviously critical. Your opponent went for a really aggressive play, so it's likely he has either Trap Stun, Solemn Judgment, or Starlight Road. You had Dimensional Prison, and you used it on Secutor, which makes sense since if he had Book of Moon, at least Secutor wouldn't resolve. Of course, if your opponent were completely crazy, using Prison on Darius would have just won you the game, but the odds of that are way too low. Now, as it turns out, he does have Trap Stun, and at first the game looks lost. But I'm pretty sure about this. If you had set Typhoon, you actually could have made a really rare play. It's something that happened to me once, and it was ruled in my favor, though this was years ago. The play would have been Chain 1, Prison, Chain 2, Trap Stun, Chain 3, Typhoon targeting your own prison. Why? Because Typhoon resolves first, sending Prison to the graveyard. Then Trap Stun activates, but since Trap Stun only negates face-up traps on the field, Prison is no longer there. It's in the graveyard when it resolves. So it becomes immune to Trap Stun, and Prison still resolves successfully. I'm about 98% sure that ruling is correct. And in this case, unless he had Solemn Judgment, that would have turned a completely lost game into a potentially 1-1. Because then you'd have Prison the Darius, he'd be left with a dead Secular on board. And suddenly the whole position shifts. Not sure if he also had Solemn, but it's definitely something worth keeping in mind. It's a rare play, sure, but it can happen. And it's good to know about it. So your opening hand here is rough, mainly because you don't have any protection. You've got two options: either do basically nothing and then maybe set a couple of bluffs hoping to bait a heavy storm, or, like you did, summon a Gladiator Beast. Now, the Gladiator Beast mirror match is entirely about small details, and when I say small details, I mean things like that extra 100 attack points, 1 extra defense card, and so on. Those tiny details actually matter a lot. That's something really important to understand. Maybe in this specific case it doesn't make a huge difference, but in general my advice is, every turn try to make the play that's the most annoying for your opponent to deal with. And I'm talking strictly about the mirror match here. So in this case I would have summoned Darius, simply because of those extra 100 attack points. If your opponent's biggest monster is Equeste, having Darius instead could literally be the difference between winning and losing the game. I'm not exaggerating. The Gladiator Beast mirror match really works like that. There are games where if I open Equeste turn 1, I lose. But if I open Darius, I win. That's how fine the margins are. Even in the worst case scenario, if you summon Darius and your opponent's monster higher attack is Darius, you'll just crash and trade. Both monsters die. But with the play you made, you'd actually lose the entire game just because of that 100 attack difference. It's easy to say, yeah, but what if he has Book of Moon, or he has Smashing, or whatever? And sure, in this exact situation that might happen. But the point is to understand the principle. Especially as the duel goes on, when both players are running low on cards, those tiny details matter more and more. So the key takeaway is, in the mirror match, always summon the monster with the extra 100 attack points. Those small edges are what win games. What a crazy comeback, and honestly, a pretty lucky one too. I can't even blame the opponent that much since one Starlight had already been destroyed, but this is exactly the kind of game that just happens sometimes. One of the main weaknesses of Gladiator Beasts is that every now and then you'll be in a game where you bet everything you're about to win, and then out of nowhere, the impossible happens and you lose. And honestly, I could open a whole parenthesis on this because it's one of the strangest decks I've ever played in my entire Yu-Gi-Oh experience. People can say the deck struggles with big monsters or whatever, but I swear, there's something weird about it. There are games where if someone walked up to you and said, Would you bet your house you're winning this? You'd do it without even thinking. And 3 turns later, somehow, you're the one top decking and losing. I've seen it happen even when you have 5 set cards and 5 monsters on the field, and your opponent is literally on full top deck mode, and still somehow it flips on you. It's almost supernatural at this point. So yeah, hit the like button if that's ever happened to you too. Alright, summoning a Queste here actually makes sense. Now this might sound a bit contradictory to what I said earlier, so I want to clarify this point. It's not a fixed rule to always summon the monster with the highest attack in the mirror match. It only becomes a rule when summoning that monster puts your opponent under real pressure, when you're forcing them to deal with something they might struggle to remove. In the mirror, it's obviously super important to preserve cards like Laquari, since it's your strongest gladiator beast in terms of attack. So in this case, knowing your goal is simply to get rid of your opponent's monster, it makes perfect sense to sacrifice the one with lower attack, which is what you did here, especially considering your opponent will most likely defend it. Now some might say, yeah, but if they have Waboku, summoning this is a mistake. But in the mirror match, 90% of the time, if someone's playing Waboku, they'll side it out, even though I've seen people not doing it, which honestly makes no sense. So to recap, if you're going to sacrifice a monster, always pick the one with lower attack. But if you're summoning with the hope or the confidence that it'll stay on the field, then you should summon the one that puts the opponent under the most pressure. Alright, so here I would have gone for a trap hole. Because honestly, if you don't use it here, you're probably never going to use it. And in the mirror match, when you can activate it, you just do it no matter what. Maybe you were afraid of a trap stun, which I kinda get, since that could have forced you to go for Solemn. But still, if not now, then when? At this point, the game's already getting a bit complicated. You can't really afford to play too conservatively here. You just have to hope Trap Hole goes through, clear their monster, and from there you're still in a playable position. You've actually been a bit lucky that your opponent didn't summon something bigger than your Quest. And since you have Solemn set, that gives you a bit of flexibility. So overall, if you go for it here, you're in a decent spot. By not doing it, you kind of put yourself in a worse position for no real reason. This game, you probably would have lost anyway, but in the mirror match, you never really know. I'm not saying it definitely would have gone differently, but maybe Trap Hole plus a Solemn could have done something. The important thing is to understand the fundamental principles of the mirror match. By following a few basic rules, I really think you can improve your win rate. So, to recap, summon the highest attack monster to put pressure on your opponent, but only when you believe it's likely to stay on the field. Keep your highest attack monsters as long as possible. If this means sacrificing the smaller ones, do it. A classic example. If your opponent has no monsters and you have Laquari, Retiari, and a Queste in hand, summon Retiari. This is good both to avoid a bottomless and because if your opponent does something like Prison, at least you're sacrificing the smaller monster. Dice rolls also matter a lot. Chariot, in my opinion, is a decent card in the mirror. If I play 3 in the main deck, I usually cut one. Sometimes it can completely win you the game. Other times it's dead if you're behind. Side cards like my body as a shield can really make a difference, especially when going second. For the rest, the mirror match really depends on how you start, who wins the dice, and if you play versions with Test Tiger or Prisma, you risk more bricks. Unlike you, who have a consistent engine that performs reliably, the entire game was played almost perfectly. There was only one situation where you left Murmillo set with a dead chariot, but that's understandable. I might have done the same. So overall, the game was solid. However, with Gizaris, I definitely would have popped the back row. It's true that if they have bottomless, leaving a monster like Armageddon on the field can be risky, especially with Plague, Spreader, Zombie in the graveyard, because next turn they could summon a Yugioh Guardian and things could get really complicated. But in a situation like this, I'd still take the risk, destroy the back row, and try to push for the win. Playing it completely safe, by clearing monsters and losing Gizaris, can put you slightly behind, even with a card advantage, especially if your opponent starts drawing things like Armageddon or Raikou, and you don't draw a monster next turn. Those are exactly the kinds of games where Gladiator Beast can slip up, so here, I would have tried to go for the win. Here, I imagine you were playing around Royal Oppression, which is fine, but also not necessarily required. Let's start with the fact that, from what I've seen, very few people still play Oppression in main in Vayu Turbo, which, in my opinion, is a questionable choice. But you have to adapt to what people are actually playing. That said, in this situation, I don't think you can afford not to resolve a Gladiator Beast. Even with a Retiari on the field, and even though you have a defensive card plus Chariot, I get the idea of not wanting to risk hitting Oppression. But the situation isn't safe enough to say, I don't need to resolve this Gladiator Beast. The only truly threatening card here would have been Royal Oppression, so resolving an quest would have been very important. It's fine to play around cards, but there's always the risk of overthinking and giving up a card advantage that a Gladiator Beast is supposed to secure. So, while your choice isn't a serious mistake, and it's understandable, personally, I would have tried to resolve. If he had Oppression, you could have made a 200 IQ play, but in this situation, I definitely would have gone for it. This was a really unlucky game. Practically everything went wrong for you here. There wasn't much you could do. It's a shame because these are the kinds of games where out of 4 key plays, even if just one thing doesn't go perfectly for the opponent, you can still win. But in this case, it felt like you were playing with your cards face up. Your opponent saw everything and hit all the right plays, so there wasn't much you could do. In my opinion, this match was very clean, played really well. I can see you're well prepared for the Vayu Turbo matchup, which you'll definitely face at the tournament. This is a clear example of the deck's strength. If you look back at all 3 games, it was consistent throughout. Game 1 you won, despite your opponent flipping the game 2 or 3 times with strong draws. The deck's consistency prevailed. Game 2, I'd say it's usually a game you win, but in this case, the opponent just drew everything perfectly. And Game 3, classic start. Gladiator Beast churning every turn, forcing the opponent into aggressive plays. At the first defensive card, you win. This is a perfect example of why you want matches to go this way at the tournament. Consistency and pressure are what carry you through. This is an opening that I personally never go for, but it's fine. It makes sense. Game 1, not revealing what deck you're playing with a Waboku set is actually a pretty clever move. Personally, I don't usually do it because I try to avoid putting myself in what I'd call a soft disadvantage. I'd rather risk something like a brain control, but have an 1800 ATK monster on board and potentially bluff a chariot. Still, I wouldn't say this opening is bad. It's interesting, and it can definitely catch your opponent off guard. So if you like it, it's perfectly fine to play it that way. Here, obviously that's just bad luck. Classic Kaya stuff, it never hits bottomless when you need it to. I actually really like the Gizer's play though, especially since your opponent didn't know what you were playing yet. It could have potentially done a lot of damage. And yeah, I imagine you just forgot to activate Waboku here, probably just a moment of distraction. Obviously that kind of thing won't happen during a real tournament. Here I might sound a bit greedy, but honestly, not really. I would have definitely set everything and gone for Murmillo. Taking out Fortress on this turn is fundamental, and yeah, it exposes you to Heavy Storm. But if they have Heavy Storm, you're losing anyway. Whether you set 2 or 3, if they've got Storm, the game's basically over regardless. So Murmillo should definitely be the play here. Removing a 2500 attack monster is huge, and honestly, if your opponent did have Heavy Storm, they probably would have already used it the previous turn, so I'd rather take the risk and try to get ahead instead of relying too much on something like Prison to resolve safely. Yes, this is what I'd call a key decision point. Sometimes you really need to be a bit greedy. If you always play the safest move, you fall into overthinking and can't keep up with decks that have more explosive plays. So when you have a chance to gain advantage, take it. Of course, it's not a rule for every situation, but in this case, we're talking about a pretty crucial turn, so I'd personally call it a fairly big missed opportunity. Here, you probably drew one of the best cards you could, Solemn Judgment. It lets you lock in your position, especially against the card you seem most worried about, Heavy Storm. But you chose to pass because you got stuck in a kind of thought loop, thinking about Heavy Storm and trying to bait it out before setting everything. The problem is you're not considering that if they do use it, you've very likely lost the game. They gain a huge advantage, and it's hard to come back. Sure, you could still set your cards, but they already have a fortress on the field and plenty of cards in hand. If you had just used Solemn, you could have set everything, consolidate your position, and as soon as you draw a bestiary, easily close out the game. The key takeaway is not to get too fixated on one line of thought. It's important to be ready to reevaluate based on the new cards you draw and adjust your strategy accordingly. It's true this was a fast-paced game, and maybe in a real tournament you'd take more time, but in my opinion, the previous turn and this one both contain mistakes that could really cost you. In my opinion, with the right decisions in this game, the ones we just talked about, you probably would have won it quite comfortably. So it's important to keep in mind that at a tournament, you don't want to lose matches like this just because of a fixed mindset or because you didn't reevaluate the situation. Especially in Gladiator Beast control, Heavy Storm is one of the most important cards to understand. Unlike many other decks, Gladiator Beast really struggles against Heavy Storm, but at the same time, you need to learn when it's worth risking it. It's a fragile deck, and there are situations where it doesn't really matter whether your opponent hits 1, 2, or even 3 back rows. Because if they do have it, you're losing the monster anyway, and probably the game with it. In those situations, it often makes more sense to just risk it and set everything, because if they don't have it, you instantly win the momentum. You've protected your monster and fully stabilized. That's probably one of the most fundamental aspects of playing Gladiator Beast control properly. I don't really like this play either, and I'm starting to notice a bit of a pattern. It feels like after game 1, once you realize you could have played better, you start over-adjusting, making weird plays or forcing things to somehow make up for it. Or maybe you just feel like, okay, this match isn't going my way, and then you start losing focus a bit. It happens to a lot of players. I've seen it many times. And I can't say for sure that it's your case since I haven't watched enough games, but it's a very common thing. And it's something that really separates people who make top cut from those who don't. It's not about never making mistakes. That's normal. It's about keeping a high level of focus and decision making throughout the whole day. because tournaments are long and you just can't afford to throw away 1 or 2 matches due to concentration drops. Now, about this specific move, I really don't like it. You basically went -1 just to kind of bluff with Laquari, but it doesn't really achieve anything, because honestly, if I were your opponent, I wouldn't really see a reason why Laquari at 2100 attack is fine, but Retiari with Book of Moon isn't. You're trying to bluff something like a Dimensional Prison, but to me, that would actually look suspicious. Personally, I would have held the Book of Moon. Maybe tried to bluff Mirror Force instead, just to protect my monster and hope to draw into something like Bestiary next turn to come back into the game. In this case, it kind of worked, but honestly, it worked by pure miracle. And even then, it didn't really change much. Fortress is still there, the situation's still not great, but I wouldn't get distracted by the fact that your opponent didn't attack. So you might think the Laquari bluff actually worked, because in my opinion, 90% of the time, that play doesn't work. 9 out of 10 cases, the opponent just attacks anyway, because removing a Gladiator Beast monster is always a priority. And even in the worst case scenario, if they get hit by a prison, it would feel weird, since in that situation, your Book of Moon play wouldn't have made much sense. It's a bit of a tricky thought process, but when you're testing, it's important to focus on the best play, not the one that just happened to work. So if you make a bad play and it works, don't say, "Oh, it worked, I'll do it again." Because I guarantee you, the next time you try that forced Laquari bluff just because it worked once, you'll lose the game. That's exactly the kind of thing you want to be mindful of. So, unfortunately, my body as a shield can't be activated during the damage step in Edison format. It's something I found out myself too, and honestly, there's no real reason for it, because in every other format, you actually can. The way the card is written, it should be allowed, but in Edison, they decided otherwise. So yeah, against Reiko, you just can't do it in damage step. That's one of the weaknesses of my body as a shield, so it's important to keep that in mind. Alright, so here are my final thoughts. Your overall level of play is good. From these games and the others I've seen, it's clear you've got the potential to top. The main areas to improve aren't really about testing more, but about thinking better. The first one is focus. In a tournament setting, you have to stay sharp all the time. Never let go, never drift. I know it can be mentally exhausting. It's a card game, it should be fun, but if you want the best results, you've got to push through that fatigue. Every single turn matters. You don't need to overthink for half an hour, but you do need to realize that one well-played turn can be the difference between topping or not topping. The second thing is understanding the deck you're playing. If you're in the mirror match, you know it's always a tight battle. If you're facing something like Vayu Turbo, then consistency is your biggest weapon. You want to gain advantage turn after turn and control the pace. And you need to fully understand your key cards, like Heavy Storm. Each turn, ask yourself, if he plays Heavy Storm here, do I lose the game? If the answer is yes, then you might as well take the risk, because sometimes playing too safe means giving up your win condition. If you can survive it and come back, then sure, play more conservatively. And one last rule: your deck isn't explosive, but it's incredibly consistent. So every game you manage to resolve is gold. Never deny yourself that momentum out of fear of weird techs or niche cards. I'm saying all this because your foundation is already strong. You don't need me to explain how gladiator beasts work, but learning to balance between playing safe and being a bit greedy can really make the difference between doing well and doing great.